Former Vice President of Ecuador, Jorge Glass, began a hunger strike in prison to protest against his political persecution after being kidnapped by Ecuadorian authorities who broke into the Mexican embassy in Quito. Muslim families celebrate the Eid Al-Firt holiday in Palestine amidst shelling and famine caused by the Israeli forces. And in Russia, authorities in the Orenburg province evacuated about 8,000 people after the Ural River flooded. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos, and from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba, we begin with the news. Former Vice President of Ecuador, Jorge Glass, began a hunger strike in prison to protest against his political persecution after being kidnapped by Ecuadorian authorities who broke into the Mexican embassy in Quito. That was reported by Glass attorney Sonia Vera Garcia, who was able to contact her client by video call after 5 days in prison. On the contact, Jorge Glass described the outrages and violence he went through during his abduction on Friday at the Mexican embassy and his transfer to a penitentiary center. Glass further thanked the government of Andrés Manuel López Obrador for having given him political asylum. This is the first appearance of Glass since Monday afternoon, when he suffered a decompensation in La Roca prison and had to be transferred to a nearby health center. The Organization of American States joins the world condemnation received by Ecuador after the violent assault on the Mexican embassy in Quito. The Ecuadorian Foreign Ministry attended on Tuesday an extraordinary meeting held in Washington to address the diplomatic crisis with Mexico. In this context, the arguments of Daniel Noboa's government were not well received by the attendants. A dozen ambassadors who took the floor and agreed on the obligation to respect international law and affirmed that there is no justification to break the inviolability of diplomatic headquarters. The issue will be discussed again in a new extraordinary session convened for April 10th at the request of Colombia and Bolivia.
In light of the serious situation openly contrary to international law that this unthinking and mistaken action by the government of Ecuador brought about, Mr. President, at this session, Bolivia takes due note of the statements made by the Deputy Foreign Minister of the Republic of Ecuador as well as of the two press releases issued by its foreign ministry over the weekend. In that sense, it's expressly stated for the corresponding legal effects that the Ecuadorian authorities confessed the Ecuadorian police's actions on Friday evening, April 5, 2024, at the headquarters of the Mexican embassy in the city of Quito. Ecuador were determined consciously and straightforwardly by the President of Ecuador, Daniel Noboa Acin.
In other news, the visit of Colombian President Gustavo Petro to Venezuela has come to an end. The trip sought to foster economic integration and the establishment of political peace. The Colombian president met with the government of Nicolás Maduro and with representatives of the opposition as a way to contribute to the construction of peace and political coexistence in Venezuela. Likewise, the Venezuelan Foreign Minister, Iván Gil, described the day of dialogue as fruitful as it helped to strengthen the bilateral relations of friendship and diplomacy. For his part, the Venezuelan president also praised the visit and highlighted Petro's particular insight into the global climate crisis. Meanwhile, in Colombia, the prosecutor's office filed an indictment on Tuesday against former President Álvaro Uribe as the alleged perpetrator of crimes of bribery of witnesses in criminal proceedings and procedural fraud, for which he will be called to trial. This is the latest update in a long legal battle in which the Superior Court of Bogotá last ruled in October against filing the case following a prosecutor's request. The accusation was brought by the first prosecutor before the Supreme Court of Justice, Gilberto Villarreal, who took on the case, who dates back to 2012. According to sources from the prosecutor's office, based on the physical evidence and probative elements, it was concluded that there are sufficient grounds to indict Uribe. The prosecutor's office has added that once the judicial distribution process is completed, the hearing for the formalization of the indictment will be held on the date and time set by the judiciary. Upon assuming the case, Prosecutor Villarreal has 90 days to substantiate the accusation against Uribe, a term that will expire on April 15th. Uribe will be able to respond to the process in freedom, as this is the norm in all cases, and the deprivation of liberty is an exceptional measure according to the prosecutor's office. And let's now review some facts about Álvaro Uribe. At age 71 years old, he is a Colombian lawyer, businessman, and politician. Álvaro Uribe was elected President of the Republic of Colombia in 2002 and re-elected in 2006. His government was criticized for human rights violations, vote buying in Congress to approve re-election, interception of phone calls for cruzadas to opponents, also linked to massacres carried out by paramilitaries, and the creation of false positives. Uribe currently faces charges for alleged procedural fraud and bribery. We go now to Argentina, where police forces arrested 11 people during the demonstrations that demanded the government of Javier Milei to respond for the non-shipment of food for soup kitchens and for the modification in social plans. Several organizations took to the streets on Wednesday to demand governmental answers to the national situation. The mobilized people demonstrated in rejection of the massive layoffs, the lack of food in soup kitchens, as well as the reduction of labor benefits in the public sector. The demonstrators were repressed by the security forces, who used tear gas and pepper spray, rubber bullets, and water tankers. Security agents arrested the people under the excuse of non-compliance with the anti-picketing protocol. The President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, during his daily press conference, thanked the solidarity of the countries that have condemned the violation of the government of Ecuador of the Mexican embassy in Quito. The head of state expressed that many countries have strongly rejected the action of the Ecuadorian government in the diplomatic headquarters of Mexico in the city of Quito. The president highlighted that several international organizations supported his country and condemned this action as a violation of international law and the Vienna Convention. López Obrador assured that regardless of the differences, both the Mexican people and the international community reject the violent action of the government of Daniel Noboa. In this context, the Mexican president announced that a complaint will be filed on Thursday on the International Court of Justice for the assault on the Mexican embassy in Quito.
We have decided to postpone for tomorrow the presentation of the denunciation for the authoritarian facts, for the seizure, the assault to our embassy in Ecuador. We're going to carry out tomorrow the presentation of the accusation.
Now let's take a short break, but remember, you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Palestine, Muslim families celebrated Eid Al-Firt holiday amidst shelling and famine caused by the total siege of the Gaza Strip by Israeli forces. In the midst of the festival of breaking the fast, marking the end of the month of Ramadan, the Israeli occupation army launched multiple attacks on the devastated Palestinian enclave. In this regard, at least 5 people were killed and several were wounded during the early morning following shelling and artillery attacks on a residential building and a school in the Nusrat camp. In addition, at least 2 mosques located in the camp were targeted. Since October 7, 33,482 Palestinians have been killed by Israel, most of them being children and women.
The day of Eid Al-Firt, such an important day for the Palestinians, was marred by death, displacements, and a humanitarian crisis affecting the country due to the crimes committed by Tel Aviv.
We prayed to God since the first day of the war. We have been displaced. We left our homes and went to Bani Sida. From Bani Sida, we went to the schools. The Jews took us out of the schools, and this moment we are making this sweet of Eid. Eid Al-Firt has arrived. Thanks to God we are alive here in the tents.
During the Eid Al-Firt holidays, thousands of families only wish for an Israeli ceasefire in the occupied territories so that they can return to their homes.
We pray to God that we can return to our homes and that there is tranquility. The holidays have arrived with the joy of Eid and the culmination of the month of Ramadan, of course. It is not like every year. Actually, we fast the month of Ramadan, but we do not feel the spirit of these occasions. It is not like before.
Amid Israel's threat to occupy Rafah, thousands of Palestinians fear displacement from their shelters and separation from their families.
God protect Rafah, its inhabitants and their homes. In Rafah, we have many friends. We have been in Rafah for some time now. If they invaded, of course we will have to flee to the area we left. We went back to see how the situation is there, and it turns out that everything is destroyed. We had to return.
For millions of Palestinians, the Eid Al-Firt holiday has been for years a day of celebration and family bonding, but sadly, it is now marked by sadness to the death of thousands of innocent Palestinians executed by the hands of Israel.
On Wednesday, the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas revealed details of the proposal presented by the mediating countries on a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The proposal negotiated by the United States, Egypt and Qatar for an agreement between the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas and the Israeli occupier consists of 3 phases. These include the rehabilitation of infrastructure and the return of displaced citizens, although the definitive withdrawal of the Tel Aviv regime troops from the occupied Palestinian territories is not explicit. The Hamas movement indicated that Israel's position does not respond to any of the demands of the Palestinian people and the resistance. In this regard, it added that they will inform the mediators of their response once they have completed their analysis of the proposal in a responsible manner at a national level. And the President of the United States, Joe Biden, called on the Israeli attack on humanitarian workers in the Gaza Strip outrageous and disregarded with this warlike approach. The U.S. President considered that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is making a mistake in the handling of his war against Gaza and its repercussions inside Israel and internationally. Biden also stated that Israel must issue a ceasefire and allow full access to all food and medicine to Gaza for a period of time of at least 8 weeks. On the other hand, Netanyahu announced that a date has already been set for an incursion of his troops into Rafah, a move the Secretary of State Antony Blinken assured his country has not been informed of. On Wednesday, during the Eid Al-Firt ceremony, Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei assured that Israel will be punished for its mistake. Khamenei referred to the Iranian officers and workers killed in terrorist attacks perpetrated by Israel in Syria. He recalled that the Persian embassies and consulates are Iranian territory wherever they are. He also highlighted the murderous campaign that has claimed the lives of more than 33,000 people in Gaza, reiterating that Israel and its Western allies should be punished in an exemplary manner. In the same vein, hours earlier, the commander of the Iranian naval force, Alireza Tansiri, called for a coalition of Muslim armies against Israel. We now have a final short break coming up, but before, we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and also share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the south. In Russia, authorities in the Orenburg province evacuated about 8,000 people after the Ural River flooded. The authorities reported that 7,800 residents were evacuated from the flooded areas and they're currently being sheltered in 40 shelters. On Thursday morning alone, a total of 11,972 houses and more than 14,000 plots of land were flooded, and the Russian Minister of Construction, Eid Al-Firt, pointed out that the level of the river in the city of Orenburg rose to 10.69 meters and is expected to rise even more in the next 24 hours, which would expose 3,580 houses and more than 3,000 orchards in the different municipalities to the risk of flooding. Meanwhile, in the United States, several storms have hit the Gulf of Mexico, with reports of damage from Texas to the Florida Peninsula and the death of at least one person. More than 30,000 homes and businesses were left without power in Saint Tammany Parish, Louisiana, where a tornado hit the city of Slidell, ripped roofs off buildings and partially collapsed others. Slidell Mayor Greg Cromer estimated that about 75 homes and businesses were damaged in the city and warned of a situation similar to the one of Hurricane Katrina. In this regard, the National Weather Service said in a press release that the area was hit by a Category EF1 tornado with winds between 138 and 177 kilometers per hour. The European Commission carried out an analysis of forest fire frequency and damage in 2023. The investigation also included the wildfire impact on the continent's economy. According to a report based on data provided by the European Forest Fire Information System, 2023 saw the largest fire season in Europe since the 1980s. In 2023, more than 500,000 hectares ended up destroyed, placing it among the 4 worst scenarios of the century. Meanwhile, so far in 2024, there have been almost twice as many forest fires amid droughts and high temperatures. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, informed that he is studying the possibility of dropping the case against the journalist and founder of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. Assange's defense described Biden's declarations as encouraging. However, the U.S. President said that although the possibility is being studied, it does not mean that the U.S. Justice Department will necessarily drop the case against Assange, but that there could be some room for negotiation. Julian Assange fights extradition to the United States, where he faces 18 federal charges related to the publication of secret documents. This process has been stalled since March, after the London High Court said that the United States had to offer assurances that Assange would not face the death penalty. And the United Nations organization warns of the need to resume the Sustainable Development Goals. The UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohamed requested urgent measures to resume the Sustainable Development Goals since the goals have not been achieved. In the report presented by Mohamed, she affirmed that the situation is worse than in 2023 after COVID-19, the conflict in Ukraine, and the aggression in Gaza. The UN representative accused humanity of losing its moral compass, which leads to a development crisis that requires a greater financial effort, in other words, an additional $4 trillion by 2030 to meet the proposed objectives. According to the United Nations Refugee Agency, women and children in Sudan are currently facing a particularly alarming situation both inside and outside the borders of the conflict-torn nation. Those displaced beyond Sudanese territory, mostly women and children, are arriving in remote areas with little or nothing and are desperate need for food, water, shelter, and medical care. 1 year after the outbreak, the 2024 Regional Refugee Response Plan for Sudan is barely 7% funded, while the response efforts within Sudan is only 6% funded. Agency figures estimate that more than 8.5 million Sudanese have fled their homes since war broke out between rival armies last April. And we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and also on TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.